biscuits. We got the good biscuits out today, so enjoy them. Right, good. Everybody happy? Good. I will say good morning. If we haven't met, I'm James Kirkup. I'm the director of the Social Work Foundation. Very, very pleased to be here today for this speech by Jonathan Ashworth, the Shadow Secretary of State for Work and Pensions. I'll say some nice things about him in a minute. I'll do the housekeeping before we get onto that. Really important things. There's not a fire drill planned this morning, so if people start to hear bells and whistles, panic and scream, and run that way out the door at the back. That's the only exit from this room. Second thing is that camera there, which is now, yes, we're on the YouTube. We are live streaming this event. So hello to the internet. It also just means when we get to the Q&A, because you'll all be asking brilliant questions, when you ask a question, you're not just speaking to the friends in the room, you're also talking to an infinite array of Russian sex bots and spam filters out there via YouTube, so bear that in mind. The speech today, or the event today, I'm very, very pleased to have Jonathan here today. This is actually going to be probably my last speech or public event as director of the SMF, because I'm moving on. It's very nice to have Jonathan here, because literally since I took this job 6.5 years ago, I've been bothering him to try and come to the SMF and give a speech. So apparently it takes my resignation to get him along. But we're very, very pleased to have him here today. Jonathan is going to talk for 12-15 minutes from the lectern about Labour, its plans for work and pensions, getting Britain back to work, and all that. I will then ask him some impertinent and unhelpful questions for a bit, and then I'll hand over to all of you to ask some clever and interesting questions. And then we'll all grab a biscuit and go on about our day. So that's that is the plan. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. And can I thank the Social Market Foundation for hosting me today, and also thank you, James. You're right, you have been badgering me for 6.5 years to come and do an event for you. I didn't quite appreciate how long you had been here. It's gone in the blink of an eye, and I felt incredibly guilty about the fact that I'd never done an event for you. So I thought I had to get something in before you moved on. But I know you've shown tremendous leadership at the SMF and taken the SMF from strength to strength. And I also want to thank you as well, James, because you might not recall, but it was about 11, 12 years ago that you commissioned me to write an op-ed for the Daily Telegraph when you were over parked at that particular newspaper. And I think that was my first op-ed in a national newspaper. And of course, it has all gone downhill since then. So thank you very much for the personal support you've shown me in that respect over the years. And I'm sure everybody here will wish you well in whatever you are doing next. And I'm sure we will continue to hear from you. Look, today I wanted to talk a little bit about the Department for Work and Pensions and how we want to make artificial intelligence work for working people, and how we think we can get people back to work. Reforming welfare and helping more people make the breakthrough into sustained employment and progress in work will be our priority in a Labour Work and Pensions Department. And a new approach to welfare reform is therefore needed. Because without action, we risk condemning a generation to a life on the margins. You'll have seen the figures this morning. Unemployment is up. 1.3 million men and women unemployed, many more fearing for their future. The numbers out of work for long-term sickness have risen to highs of around 2.5 million. 760,000 young people are not in education, employment, or training. All this at a time when there are 1 million or so vacancies in the labour market. It's why reforms are so urgent. After 13 years of Conservative government, too many people are trapped on welfare, going nowhere. It's an unforgivable waste of their potential. A Labour government will help people move off universal credit and into work. And when in work, we will help people progress into a career or work more hours so they no longer need to rely on universal credit. And to do that, we need new reforms and new thinking. Now, 6 months ago, I outlined welfare reforms, where those currently not expected to work on disability or sickness-related benefit, but who want to try work would be given support and help to do so, would be given security to make the journey into work should they want to go on that journey by proposing changes to the work capability assessment regime and the access to work scheme. With my colleague, the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, we've described how better joining up of health services and employment services can offer tailored help for many people currently out of work with mental health conditions and support those people to move into employment with support and security. It's become very topical in the newspapers to talk about the numbers of over 50s who've left the labour market, though many say they would like to return to work, and we've put forward proposals about giving them options to return to work and ensuring that flexible options are available. Yet under the government system, too many of those over 50s are denied any help finding a job. Just 2 weeks ago, I heard a story of a 51-year-old woman who visited a job centre, but because she doesn't need to sign on for universal credit, they told her they couldn't do anything for her. Instead, they sent her away with a flyer for a jobs fair in a few weeks' time. Under our plans, job centres will help the over 50s find the flexible work opportunities many say they want. To help parents move into work and take on more hours, our Shadow Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, has a plan to expand school breakfast clubs. And when we know that firms are trying to recruit and need skilled employees, and when we also know that AI, data, digital and technology means that into today's world and tomorrow's, there'll be an even greater premium on skills, Keir Starmer last week outlined new reforms to give unemployed young people the skills necessary in the modern world to find well-paid work, with reforms to how we would deliver skills and reform the apprenticeship levy. These are all, if you like, active labour market strategies. But alongside these, we also need a Job Centre Plus service that is fit for the needs of a modern, dynamic economy. Not a service which is a conveyor belt to low-paid work. We want a reformed Job Centre Plus offering an escalator to a better life. Now, I actually think Job Centre Plus was one of the most important reforms of the Blair-Brown government years ago. But today, our job centres must become more responsive to employers, more linked with the needs of local communities, with more local discretion, making it better equipped to deal with the challenges of a modern, dynamic economy. And today I'm arguing that better use of AI, data, digital and technology can help us transform DWP services, helping people into work faster. Because the sad reality is what's on offer today isn't up to the challenges of tomorrow. Despite around a £1 billion technology budget, the department has a checkered history with technology. While yes, it was rightly praised for successfully administering an increased benefit caseload in the pandemic, other projects have been beset by delays and problems. Take the pensions dashboard, for example, reset after millions of pounds has already been spent. The failure to embrace and properly grip new technology has consequences. Every year, thousands of people miss out on the benefits they are entitled to because the DWP does not target them effectively. Huge volumes of claims are processed late, and the bewildering world of online job applications means that people who interact with the job centre can be left pointlessly applying for the same job twice. The DWP impacts on millions of lives every single day, but yet doesn't even hold some of the most basic information, such as the jobs people want to apply for or the training it is sending young people on. I've asked a number of questions of ministers, and they cannot even tell us what training people on universal credit are pursuing. And I was talking to a voluntary sector organisation just last week who have worked with the DWP and who want to help unemployed young people find work. And they went to the job centre and said, we want to help young people in this area find work in hospitality. And they asked for a list of young people who have indicated an interest in working in the hospitality in the local sector. But the job centre said they couldn't run off a list of those young people who have expressed an interest in working in hospitality. not because of data security, but simply because they don't keep that sort of information when a firm and a voluntary sector organisation is asking to help them get people to fill those vacancies. And of course, there's fraud and error in the DWP at over £8 billion a year. Can you imagine a business making over £8 billion of errors year after year and doing nothing about it? Now, these past years have seen new technology and advances in the use of AI, automation, data science that we couldn't have dreamt of 10 years, 12 years ago. The apps that we use every day in our work and personal lives, Spotify, Bolt, newspaper apps, even read my old Telegraph up somewhere on the Telegraph app, I'm sure, have all embraced innovation and used technology to improve the services they offer. I don't believe the same can be said for the Department of Work and Pensions. It's too often an analogue service in an AI age. And while many warn of the risks of AI, I'm an optimist and want to embrace the opportunities AI gives us for reform. The DWP should be making smarter use of AI, digital data and tech, to transform Job Centre Plus services. Used properly, and yes, with safeguards in place, AI can help prepare job seekers moving to work, can help us tackle fraud, and it can ensure citizens receive the payments they are entitled to. Take moving into work. The current journey into work for a job centre customer can be time consuming. We expect job centres, via their claimant commitment, to apply for multiple jobs a day, to check local newspaper websites, to check government websites. But I've heard stories from job seekers who tell me they apply for numerous jobs only to find it's the same job advertised again and again. The process can mean endless applications for jobs that aren't necessarily suitable, wasting time for the applicants, and frankly, no use for the firms as well. And on what the most recent analysis published by the DWP, Job Centre Plus helps 60% of unemployed people back into work within 9 months. I believe job centre services of the future could make better use of AI, analysing job seekers' skills and preference matching them with potential jobs and helping them move into work faster. An AI in the hands of job centre work coaches can better help job seekers with CV analysis tools and interview practice as well. AI is now routinely used for rapidly assessing CV applications for many jobs. Let's now make it focused on getting people the skills they need for future jobs as well. And better use of data could ensure that the job centres adapt as advice and help for job seekers when local labour market conditions change. So AI could mean the degree of personalisation and the quality of jobs that can be advertised will make the overall experience a better one for unemployed people and should free up job centre employment advisors to offer greater support for more vulnerable individuals who need more tailored help, rather than spending hours correcting CVs and wading through lists of job postings. Other countries are moving in this direction, so are voluntary sector groups, so why not the DWP? In recent weeks, I've spoken to debt advice charities who have embedded AI chatbots in their services to provide round-the-clock support. Fully embracing technology should allow job centre services to do the same. And as I've said, better use of data science and AI should allow us to drive up the take-above entitlements currently going unclaimed. And the shocking amounts of fraud and error overseen by the DWP, 8 billion on recent figures, where often criminal gangs are taking the taxpayer for a ride, can be confronted using more and better use of machine learning and pattern detection techniques as well. Now, what I'm describing today is not fantasy. There have been some small DW pilots in the use of AI, but this government's distracted approach, more focused on grandstanding than delivery when it comes to AI, has meant that these innovations have yet to be properly scaled. In contrast, a Labour government will be serious about technology. We will make sure proven innovations are scaled to benefit all citizens. There is the potential to save millions of pounds from efficiencies in the budget, such as better buying, spending controls and procurement across the DWP's IT contracts. And in doing so, we can place AI, data and technology at the heart of our Job Centre Plus reform agenda. And now, of course, in deploying AI, we need to be responsible as well, as my Shadow Cabinet colleague Lucy Powell has outlined today in a separate speech. AI will bring enormous benefits, but we do have to be clear-eyed where it has limitations, which is why we'd always take a responsible approach and one that always has a human in the loop. But we can transform our services using AI, and that's what a Labour government would want to do. Because I'm a reformer, I'm a moderniser, and the reforms that I will drive are built on principles of opportunity, responsibility and social justice, helping more people into quality work, giving people an opportunity to make the most of themselves, giving people dignity and crucially giving people self-belief. That's the lesson I learned from my parents who, through working late nights in Manchester clubs and bars, knew a job was about opening up new horizons. I want to give people confidence and self-belief through the chance of a good quality job, which is why Labour today is the party of welfare reform, having put forward proposals on sickness and disability benefits, and is also today the party of public services reform. A Labour Department of Work and Pensions will be a trailblazer, embracing AI to open up opportunities for work for everyone. New technology holds enormous potential to make the future of work better. A Labour government will deliver on this potential. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. So I will ask you a few questions, which you can, if you're, depending on how good your eyesight is, you can pre-preempt by reading my notes in front of me.
I can't read.
That's good. It's encoded. I'll ask you a few questions on a few topics, and then we'll go to our friends in the audience. The first question I want to ask is just, almost comes out your final comments there. You said Labour is now the party of welfare reform.
Yeah.
So I'm just interested in what that means in terms of politics, but also economics. And you also talked about a previous Labour government when it was like different. We had a different politics of welfare. You're here to talk about AI and the modernisation, the updating of job centres. You're here, as all Labour frontbenchers are, under the unblinking eye of Pat McFadden and Rachel Reeves to make sure that you're not committing party to spending any more money. In previous years, public service reform has been associated with spending less on public services. You're talking about a technology that in some cases can replace human beings, can make services cheaper and more efficient. Would the welfare reform that you're thinking about, the AI-powered welfare reform and the rest of it, would that mean a Labour government spending less on welfare overall than the current government does?
Well, first of all, you rightly suggested in your question there that Labour politicians are determined and preoccupied with fiscal discipline, and we are. That is because we've seen what happens when a government is cavalier with the public finances and makes uncosted spending commitments. It pushed the economy to the edge last autumn, and families across the country are paying more on their mortgages as a consequence of that indiscipline. Which is why the Labour Party will go into the next general election with every commitment costed. We will not make promises we cannot meet. We will not make plans we cannot deliver. On every proposal we put forward, you'll see where the money is coming from. And my challenge to the government is, where has the money gone? Where is the 8 billion that they've lost in fraud and error in the DWP? That's way before you get onto what's been wasted on PPE contracts and so on. We're going to say where the money's coming from. They need to ask where the money has gone. So I'm not making spending commitments today, and nor will I be making any spending commitments on any level.
It could be a savings commitment.
I am making savings commitments, because what I am outlining here is an ambition to lift people off universal credit and get more people into work. Now, obviously, as people move into work, some of those people will continue to be eligible for universal credit, which as it tops up their wages. But it's not just getting people off unemployment benefit and into work. It's also about giving people the support to progress at work and increase the numbers of hours that they work, so you can reduce the overall benefit there. That's the first thing. Secondly, in terms of wealth,
the ambition is to reduce the overall benefit.
Well, of course you'd want to get people off unemployment-related benefits. Yeah, of course you'd want to get people into paid quality work, so they don't have to rely on universal credit to top up their wages. You know, that's what we want. We want people to be able to get a good, well-paid job, to build a home, to support a family, and to improve their quality of life. That is what a Labour government will be all about. Secondly, though, you asked specifically about welfare reforms. Well, it's almost 6 months to the day, funnily enough, that I was at one of your rival organisations, the Centre for Social Justice, where I outlined in my speech, I put forward some very particular welfare reforms. I proposed that somebody who is currently out of work and has been through the work capability assessment and has been designated as no requirement to search for work because they are on long-term sick or disabled, but who may indicate that they want to attempt the journey into work, there's hundreds of thousands of them to suggest that they would want to. I have suggested that those people should be supported into work by better bringing together the support that is available, better bringing together the support that is available in health services and employment services, but crucially this, if work doesn't work out for them, because some of these people haven't been working for some time, they should be given a bridge back to the sickness and disability benefit they were on. So at the moment, they are disincentivised from trying work because they worry that they'll have to go through another work capability assessment, which for many people who go through it is a particularly horrible process. And secondly, they're worried that if they try work, it calls into question their entitlement to personal independence payments, but actually that is a payment about disability, not about work. And the third thing I proposed is that through the Access to Work scheme, where an individual gets support in the work 26 weeks. I mean, I had a disabled constituent, he applied to Access to Work and he was told he had to wait 26 weeks to get an Access to Work assessment on what adjustments they would be prepared to offer him to move into his employment. That is ridiculous. That is ridiculous. Individuals should know in advance of taking a job what level of support they would get from the Access to Work scheme. They don't have that at the moment. So there were a number of welfare reforms I put forward at the Centre for Social Justice. I then read 2 or 3 days later in the Times, we've got colleagues from the Times here, that Mel Stride was going to copy them. So it's nice that the shadow work and pension secretary picked up some of those reforms. But he actually, when you look at the detail, he didn't actually put forward the work capability assessment reform that we proposed, and they could do that now to help some of those people who are in the 2.5 million who are out of work for reason of sickness, to give those people support to move into the workplace.
Okay, I'm going to come back on to one of the questions that arise from what you just said in a second, but I want to double check one brief thing on AI and AI employment. If I'm working jobs and plus employment, and I hear the man who might well be the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions talking in the speech this morning, I might be thinking, God, is he going to sack me, replace me with a robot? Would your plans have implications for the human beings working jobs and plus?
This is not about replacing staff with robots. We're not putting Metal Mickey in the job centre. For those of you of a certain age who remember Metal Mickey. Look around the room, not many of you clearly do.
I get that.
This is about new tools which will allow our job centres to be more productive in helping people move into work quicker. I mean, actually, here's the thing, yeah? Right? If you were, I do not know. I might be wrong. I'm assuming that in moving on from the Social Market Foundation, you have not gone to the job centre to ask them to help you find a new job.
You are correct.
Right?
I have gainful employment.
And it may well be, I don't know, I may be making too many presumptions about you, James, but it may well be that you've spoken to a private recruitment agency, you've looked on LinkedIn. A lot of these organisations use these types of technology to send to you, if you're searching on LinkedIn, the types of jobs which are more suitable for your skills. That type of technology is not getting used in the job centre system. And there has to be a way of better matching the people who go to the job centre with the vacancies that are on offer. So this is about giving the coaches in the job centre greater tools to find people into work. And although we're not putting in place a specific target, I believe that if it is taking 9 months to get 60% of the unemployed into work, and they're the most recent DWP statistics. They don't like to publish the statistics very regularly, but they're the most recent ones they have published. I believe you can actually get people to work quicker by using some of these tools.
You're coming on to the topic I want to ask you about next. You've talked a lot about people who want to get jobs and people who want to get off benefits into employment and the tools that you can give them in that endeavour. What about the people who aren't keen? What happens when people don't show that willingness? Because when you gave that speech 6 months ago to a lesser think tank, there was a degree of controversy in parts of your party and the wider left because you said that sanctions would remain. That would be conditionality. So can you go in, what happens if I don't feel like putting myself forward to your Metal Mickey robot machine LinkedIn nonsense?
There isn't going to be a Metal Mickey robot. It's going to be modern AI. I think we need to forget Metal Mickey. This is a sort of the 80s reference. Robots are not replacing the staff, is the point.
Tell me about conditionality and sanctions.
Look, we have been clear. There will be conditions attached signing on for unemployment benefits. I mean, that is a principle that has been in the system. Beveridge talked about it is not appropriate for people to be signing on for unemployment-related support and do nothing with their time. There will be conditions attached. The principles that you have the right to get support from the job centre. Depending on what skills and extra help you need, you will have the right to take advantage of the extra training opportunities that job centres organise. You have the right to go on a sector-based training programme as well, if the job centre can arrange that for you. But you do have a responsibility to work with the conditions that we are applying. But the difference between what I say and perhaps what some Conservatives say is that Conservatives, or some versions of conservatism, believes that the only tool that the job centre should have is enforcing conditionality. I believe job centres should get better at arranging you suitable training. Now, I've not talked about upskilling and reskilling today in this speech, but of course, a changing labour market is going to demand that we look again at the way in which we offer training and reskilling opportunities. And actually, look, it's what the taxpayer and what people would expect. You do have to have conditions attached to unemployment. But by the way, let me just be clear, in case anybody misinterprets me,
that would never happen.
There are people, who have disabled people, long-term sick people, who cannot work and should not be part of a conditionality regime and should be given support and security and inclusion. And that will always be the case with the Labour government.
Welfare reform, rights, responsibilities, sanctions. Has anything changed in Labour thinking on welfare since that man Tony Blair was around?
Has anything changed? Yeah. Has anything changed? Yeah. Well, I mean, it was certainly very clear that Tony Blair, Gordon Brown Labour government was determined to help people move into work. And I'm determined to help people move into work. But I mean, it's strange. Really. I mean, when I recommend my speech saying I want to help more people into work, and I'm worried, particularly about a younger generation being left at the margins, and I'm really worried that the numbers who are out of education, employment training are increasing, right? And although there is some debate about the numbers of children who have not returned to school roles, there is nonetheless, the Children's Commissioner said it, a number of children who have not returned to school roles since the pandemic, right? It's a reasonable assumption, I think, to make that unless something is done about that cohort of young people, they could become the NEETs of tomorrow. Well, I'm not prepared to allow a sort of situation where we just sort of give up on this and we're not doing what we can to support people into work. The opportunity to get a good job is about one's self-dignity and self-belief. And it absolutely transformed our outlooks, our aspirations as a family in the 80s. And I remember how awful it was actually when my dad lost work and he had to sign on. So getting people into work is absolutely what I am about. Is that different to the Tony Blair and Brown government? I mean, look, I'll let others interpret that. But I think this is the bad thing. This is the very essence of what a Labour government should be about, in my view.
Right, three hopefully relatively brief topics before I go to the audience. So you're talking a lot about people, currently in the system trying to get them back into work. What about yes, that's the stock. What about the flow? Isn't there an argument for doing more to keep people who are currently in work from flowing out of work? So there are people who make a strong argument around statutory sick pay, for instance, not being enough to support people who have to take periods out of work. Could you do more to provide more of a safety net for people who, for whatever reason, have to interrupt or pause their work to make sure they stay in employment, that they don't fall out of the labour market?
I think this is a very key point, actually. So there's a few things going on which I think governments need to think about. In fairness, this government has to think about a little bit about it as well. First of all, what is the right occupational health support in the workplace? We've never really had an occupational health service in this country. There's been different schemes. Dame Carol Black, about 12 years ago, produced a really good report and suggested a occupational health scheme be put in place. I think it was called Fit to Work, from memory. And the government trialled it for about a year, 18 months. And then David Gork, when he was working pension secretary, pulled it because the evidence, they felt the evidence was that people were taking it up, although there was an argument as to whether people knew enough about it. Some of the deals that have, one of the other things that we have proposed is that some of the contracted out employment support, which the job centre send people on, as many of the people here will know, the DWP signs contracts with some of the big outsourcing firms to do the contracted out support, often sending some of the harder to, some of the people who are furthest away from the labour market onto some of this contracted out support. I think some of that contracted out support would be better delivered at a local level. I've seen this in Greater Manchester where they have a working well project. Actually, in some parts of the country, I think in South Yorkshire and the West Midlands, they've actually, through their devolution deal, got some contracted out support to put in place some occupational health schemes. Thrive into Work, Thrive at Work, I think the West Midlands one is called, and something similar in South Yorkshire. So I think as we devolve more of a contracted out support budget, I would be encouraging combined authorities to look at what support is available for the workplace within the budget envelope that we are looking at evolving. So you're right. I think there's another interesting thing coming along, which we need to be aware of. That there is some early signs that there's increasing numbers of people who are presenting with musculoskeletal issues. And there is a question mark as to whether that is because of a move to more home working. So in the long circumstances, home working and flexible working is probably a good thing to help disabled people, sick people, or people with an ongoing chronic condition.
But not if you're hunched over the kitchen table and
exactly.
Back, yes.
And then, so there was a question then. I mean, this is getting off my brief as a working pension secretary. It's more a question for a sort of, your sort of employment rights minister in the Department of Biz these days. If more and more of your workforce is working from home, what support are you putting in place to ensure that they're not making themselves ill by being hunched over the Zoom calls on their laptops? But there's definitely a role for contracted out employment support in putting in place more occupational health, and we are beginning to see bits of that.
Can we just tease that one out a little bit? I absolutely agree. I should say, I'm still an employer here at the SMF. I'm as someone who once ended up with terribly debilitating RSI due to a bad desk. One of the things we did here at the SMF when we sent everybody home in the pandemic was to say, if you need a chair, if you need a desk, if you need adaptations at home, we will pay for it because we don't break you while working at home. That's the sort of thing you want employers to basically.
I think most good employers will be doing it anyway.
Yeah, but you want to give them a bit of a push in that direction.
Most good employers are doing it anyway, and they do have health and safety commitments that they have to adhere to. So I think most employers are doing it anyway. But I think it is something that needs to be properly focused on. I mean, it's not technically my that bit of it. This
you have the bully pulpit. You can create the moral norm.
I mean, there's a broader question as to why labour market policy in the UK is split across so many different government departments. for me.
Well,
That's
a firm commitment.
That's another thing.
A Labour government will abolish the DWP and create
that
administrative
is not remotely where I'm sitting in the conversation, but I think but that is why as we devolve some of the contracted out employment support, you'd want to see local areas put in place some observation as is happening in Tammy Yorkshire and West Midlands, and there is a working well project in Manchester, so I think that covers some as well.
You're lucky I'm not my old job, or I'll be scurrying off to write headlines saying Labour demands workers, your employers give people a nice desk at work at home. The one question, other question I want to ask about people flowing out of work, and you know this is coming because I'm a pensions nerd, and I told you I was going to ask you this last week, so you can prepare the answer. There is an argument, you talk about over 50s a lot, rightly. Some people think that there is a portion of the over 50s group who have left the workforce, and they are at the upper end of the income scale. It's not everybody, not everybody's on the golf course. There are some people who appear to have left the workforce because they turned 55, got access to their pension under pension freedoms, and are starting to spend their retirement fund early. Now, some people, again, think that is a problem, that means policy has allowed people to exit the labour force too early, taking their skills with them, and therefore there should be a re-evaluation of pension freedoms and the policy framework that allows them to do that. Do you think that pension freedoms are allowing people to exit the workforce earlier than you'd like them to go? And is this something that, is this an area where you're going to have a look at policy to address that problem?
No, we're not proposing to re-evaluate pension freedoms, but there are a number of different economic circumstances which have encouraged a number of over 50s to leave the labour market. And there are lots of different things going on. I mean, the over 50s is a vast socio-economic differences in this group, so we shouldn't have a sort of a broad brush sort of the role of the golf course as Jeremy suggested. There's a number of different things going on. There are some over 50s, it tends to be women, shouldn't be, but it does tend to be women, who are squeezed because they've left the labour market, because they both want to care for their grandchildren, to help their sons and daughters go to work, but equally, because of an ageing society, they are also caring for a mother, a father, a partner who perhaps has had a stroke, who's got dementia and so on, and they're sort of squeezed in the middle. So the impact of there being inadequate childcare provision in the economy, and it's well documented what that social care provision is like, those two problems have put pressure on a certain cohort of over 50s to leave the labour market. But some of that group of over 50s may return to the labour market if a flexible option could be found for them. At the moment, the job centre will not help broker a flexible option. It may well be that some of those over 50s in that circumstance would be prepared to go to work if they had an employer who agrees that yes, you can come in mid-morning because you need to look after your parents in the morning. Because I need to make sure that your mum is up and washed for breakfast, and understands that you need to get back early afternoon because there might be other requirements for your mum, for example. Right. So I think that flexible options can help that generation, or perhaps help some of that group rather return to work. I think there's a genuine question about the sorts of broad guidance, not financial advice. I don't want to cross a boundary, but broad guidance that citizens can get. I know from 50s onwards, you're supposed to be able to access pension services, but actually, people probably in their 40s need to be thinking about that, and perhaps there's a way in which some of that can be broadened out as well.
Can I jump on that?
Yeah.
I'm going to put some words in your mouth here. You're raising the provision of guidance for people over 50 taking that decision to leave the workforce and access their pension. Is that an expression of concern that some people are making that decision to leave the workforce, access their pension, without having really good information about making a properly informed decision about what they're doing, and therefore they're leaving too early and they're going to run out of money? Well, is that the worry?
I think that has to be a worry, but I think my bigger worry is that the economic circumstances are driving a bunch of people to draw down those pensions. Storing up, the cost of living crisis today is storing up a cost of living crisis tomorrow, for a certain cohort who feel they've had to draw down some of that money just to survive and day to day. And given what's happened with mortgages, people in their 50s still have mortgages, probably not, hopefully if you've had your house for a long time, you might not have the mortgage repayments that they would have had in their 20s and 30s. But some of them will be grappling with mortgages, which, as we know, because of the recent turmoil, is particularly uncomfortable for a lot of people.
I've used up my 5 minutes on pensions. We do a second hour later on bulk annuities purchase and and DB reform. So hopefully we'll stay for that. We'll now go to your audience for any questions. Hands go up. Right, I'm going to go. In fact, as promised, we're going to go Chris with the Times, and then I'm going to shamelessly favour Melville, who's an SMF trustee, my boss, for the month. So Chris from the Times.
Chris Meyer from the Times. Mel Stride's already been on Twitter this morning claiming that he's already using robots, and he is saying that also he's also talking about joining up health with unemployment services, all these things. So beyond swapping as to who is stealing whose ideas, what actual points of principle, and saying you would do it better, what actual points of principle difference are there between the government for it? So are you just saying we do the same thing but more competently, or are you saying actually there is a key point of principle difference here? And if I can just quickly to pick up your point on musculoskeletal conditions, and your point on what private sector should do, what do you think government should be doing more to support those people? I mean, if you agree with Mel Stride that is an issue driving some of the system, what should the government be doing to support those, stop more people joining?
Well, we actually proposed bringing together health services and employment services, and then I was pleased when Mel Stride picked up another one of my ideas. And although you say you don't want us to squabble about who said it first, forgive me if I'm going to take the opportunity to point out I did say it first, and I'm pleased that he's doing it. On the point about musculoskeletal, I mean, again, some of the most effective services for getting people back into work when you join up health and employment services tend to be in mental health trusts or addiction services. But there are some pilots where you can put employment services in primary care, which could also help with some of these some of these presenting with muscular skeletal problems. You argue is there a principal difference on that? Well, presumably not, because the government picked up some of the suggestions that we put forward, which we're very pleased, although we'll watch carefully to see how much of it is implemented. On the point about AI, well, they have, and as I indicated in my speech, they are beginning to use some of this in terms of fraud and error, but we're still losing £8 billion of fraud and error. In fraud and error, that's a huge amount of money. And they're not, in any meaningful sense, as far as I can tell, using AI in the job centres, which is where you could get people into work faster, which is something I think we need to do when, quite clearly, we've got vacancies in the economy. And getting more people into work is one of the key ways in which you grow your economy, make your economy more productive, and it helps you in the fight against inflation and helps you stabilise the cost of living. So, if the government want to, take their lead from me, that's that's very flattering. But of course, it'd be much better if they just let me be the working pension secretary and do it myself.
Right, Melville Rodriguez, SMF trustee.
Mr. Ashworth, my question is focused on pension reform. Last night, the Chancellor announced the Mansion House reforms. Would Labour support those reforms? And if in government, would they continue with those reforms?
So this is becoming something of a theme, because Rachel Reeves actually announced a few weeks ago that she wanted to pursue some of these pension reforms. When she was in Washington, she did an interview, I think, for the Financial Times, where she indicated she wanted to pursue some of these pension reforms to make greater use of the assets in pension funds. Now, I think it's important to understand there's three different bits to this, as you'll understand because you know about pensions, as will you, but perhaps not everybody follows the pensions debate. But
If they come to the SMF, better.
There's obviously the money that is in DC, about 2 trillion or so. There's what's in DB and the different DB pension pots, and how can we make better use of these different funds to invest in, whether it's infrastructure projects or in startups or in life sciences. And there's also what's in the local government pension scheme as well, which is a very big pension scheme. I think we should be making better use of these assets. I don't think it's quite as simple as saying, let's just do what they do in Australia, let's just do what they do in Canada, because we all have different environments, we have different ecosystems for pensions which have developed over many years. But the principle of bringing some of these funds together in a non-mandated way, and you can see if we can free up some of these funds to get a greater return for savers, I think is a good one. And that's the thing that sometimes gets lost in this debate. Different institutions are looking at this money thinking, aha, that's how we're going to fund our new interesting project, that's how we're going to fund our new life sciences startup. You always have to be driven by what is in the interest of savers and getting a better return for savers. So there's going to be a lot of devil in the detail of all of this, which is why I think the DWP this morning have published reams and reams of documents, which I have to be honest, because I've not had a chance to read it this morning, but I'm obviously going to start reading it over the next few days. There's going to be a lot of devil in the detail, but in the principle, yes. But here's another example of how that was where Jeremy Hunt was following us, like Mel Stride following me. I mean, Mel Stride copies me all the time. I mean, this is absolutely true. It's a true story, right? It's an absolutely true story, James. Right? I went to the place, the shop, the tailors, where I get my suits from. And literally the man in there said, honestly, it's an absolutely true story. The man in there said,
It's too good for the workers.
No, a suit shop. The man in there said, we have that Mel Stride in here the other day. He literally goes to the same place as me to get my suits. He's always copying my ideas. I'm going to get out.
I'm going to check the legal later on. Right, I'm going to go to the back. We've got two questions here on the side here. The gentleman with the green shirt and then the lady next to him. Just go together. We'll take them pairs and then we'll go for the
Yeah, Andrew Phillips, researcher at Demos.
Hello there.
Hi. The government's disability and health white paper announced that they plan to entirely remove the work capability assessment. Would a Labour government support that policy?
Good. Lady next to you.
Naomi Clayton from Learning and Work Institute. I wanted to pick up on some of your points around good work. And I think you could probably describe the current system as kind of work first and then work some more, particularly with kind of new in-work conditionality approach that will bring 1 million people into that kind of regime in September. And more widely, I think national minimum wage has been a success, but lots of people.
And the question arising from that is?
Earnings and income volatility. So I guess my question is, how can job centres support more people to find the right job, and how might that fit with a broader strategy around good work and supporting more people to access good quality jobs?
Okay.
Yeah.
So on the work capability side, the problem with the government proposal is they've just put it out there and offered no serious detail about how it's going to work in practice. Because if you just say that a decision on whether you are fit for work is based on the current personal independence payment regime, that's a different assessment regime. That is assessing disability. It's not assessing the condition you're in and what that means for looking for work or being in work. And the government, it feels to me, I mean, maybe I'm being too cynical, it just feels to me that they felt that they needed to say something about this, and they just put that out there, and then they kicked it into the long grass because they don't really know how that is going to work. A Labour government would want to reform these regimes because we do want people to be given the support to move into work, but these by their nature are very sensitive issues. There was a lot of people who are being treated very badly by these regimes, so it's important that we proceed cautiously and sensitively. But one of the things that could be done pretty much straight away is the proposal that we have put forward, that if you have been through the work capability regime and you want to try work, you should be encouraged to move into work with support. And if it doesn't work out for you, for whatever reason, you can return, you have a bridge back to the payments that you were on without having to go through that regime again. That is something the government could be doing now, but instead they have kicked welfare reform into the long grass on that bit. On job centre, look, job centres should be helping people move into good, well-paid jobs. And actually, at a local level, we would want to see job centres better linked up, better integrated with what is happening locally, better integrated with local employers, with combined authorities, different sectors, really understanding what are the needs of a local area, which is why using AI to capture data might sound a bit techy, but a better understanding in more granular detail of what is needed in a local area is really, really important. So that when the job centres are arranging the bits of training that job centres do, tends to be just like CV writing classes or confidence building, but actually, if they know employers and a local authority are saying, these are the shortages in this area, can you partner better with adult education providers and certain firms in the area to help us get people to fill these jobs? So it's things like that we should be doing, yeah? At the moment, the job centres are completely run in a very sort of, centralised way from Whitehall. I always make this point, the metaphor never quite works, but no one's given me a better metaphor. So you might be able to do this because you're a good wordsmith. So, but let me just sort of, try it out on you. At the moment, 75 years ago, when Bevan created the NHS, he said he wanted to hear the clang of a bedpan falling in Tredegar ring out through his office in Whitehall. Well, the job centres now, and I said this is where the metaphor, I need a bit of help, but it's like, if a stapler fell off a desk and makes a thud in a job centre in Leicester, you hear it in the Department, Secretary of State's office. That cannot be right. Job centres need to be better integrated with what is happening at a local level. Can you think of a better metaphor? You're good at this sort of thing.
I'll work on that. I'm just staplers are a thing anymore. I think they're pretty banned.
Well, they are in job centres. That's why they need to be using technology more.
Right, while I'll work on that, we're going to run questions. We're going to go, actually, I can see we're going to do three now. Jamie, the gentleman behind you, and the lady there. Jamie Thomas.
Thank you, Jamie.
I will come to the back of once.
Jamie from ZUK. The DWP currently loses or concedes 4 in 5 appeals against personal independence payment decisions. And of course, underneath that, you've got a lot of people who would win if they appealed, but for various reasons they don't. How would a Labour government address the current decision-making system?
Peters and then gentleman.
From Cicero. Just on the pensions point, just to continue the theme there, just to assure you, not the only one who cares about pension change, but so you're worried about people drawing down maybe too much. One question is, should contributions go up so that people have more money in their pension pots to begin with?
Yes.
And secondly, should people, before they start getting their pension pots, access to be booked into a pension-wise appointment system so that they know exactly what their options are before they start?
Very good SMF report, and that's something last year you can read. I think you read it. Later there.
Yeah, thank you. Holly from the New Economics Foundation. Were you planning on doing anything specific regarding revitalising the Kickstart scheme? Would probably be one of the first things I think about, or anything training adjacent in that area. And second of all, what would be your plans for in-housing / insourcing some of the data collections or the contracts that are currently within DWP? Would you be planning on doing any of that? And with this new AI technology that you plan on using, would that be developed in-house as well, or would that be contracted?
Right. Okay.
So on the PIC reform, I mean, we're very aware of the statistics on PIC reform. We're not putting forward a proposal today on how we would reform PIC, but we are very aware that the way in which it operates, there is something going wrong. And any changes that we would want to introduce, we want to develop together with organisations that have expertise in this area. On Dan's from Cicero, no, we are not proposing mandating increasing contributions, but I do think people should access advice, and I want to see how we can make it easier to access that guidance. And SMF did have a very good report on that a year or so ago, which I've read. And then on the outside, well, some of the contracted out support, we think can be better commissioned by handing over some of those budgets to Andy Burnham, Andy Street, etc., etc. In some ways, that's the whole logic of devolution. If you give some of this support to Andy Burnham, it's up to the Greater Manchester Authority to decide who they think or what they think is the best way in which to provide that service in their locality. But we do think, I have seen the benefits of the voluntary sector playing a role in helping people back into work. And in terms of the IT, well, at the moment the DWP, which is sort of £1 billion contract or so, employing thousands of people in digital, I think it's responsible for something like 50 million lines of code. has a number of contracts with different IT providers. I believe by going through those contracts, we can find efficiencies through better procurement, which is what we would want to do. I'm not going to make a commitment to say every single bit of technology the DWP is responsible for. We all done in-house. It has contracts with all kinds of different IT companies, but we want to go through all those contracts and look at how we can make savings.
Quick question on the AI and tech from our online audience. Hello then. From Anna Dent from the SMF, who's just asking on AI. There's some evidence to show that essentially machines tend to embed and replicate human biases.
Yeah,
That there is a risk that effectively what you do is you're repeating systematic cultural biases against against women, against you. So where is that you're thinking to make sure?
I mean, this is a really
inclusive
important
road. The metal Mickey is probably inclusive.
Yeah, this is a really important point because whereas I'm an optimist and think that AI and technology can improve services, we do have to be alert to some of the limitations. We do have to be alert that in some circumstances its application it could be brittle, that AI is not divine, it's not omniscient, it makes mistakes. And because of the way in which particularly these generative AI models have been produced, because they've just essentially scraped data, the whole of the sort of internet, they can reinforce biases in certain circumstances. It's why, in the end, human beings have to be gatekeepers to these tools. That's why this is not like computers are going to replace staff, because you will need staff to use these tools to express judgments and allow these tools to improve what they're offering. But in the end, a human being has to be there. And you'll have seen now. I mean, I'm not really talking about these ChatGPT, that. Some of the very basic tools that are used routinely in the private sector are not being used in the DWP. But you'll all have seen, I'm sure, the stories of generative AI making mistakes. A very famous story of a New York lawyer who used, have you heard about this? This New York lawyer used ChatGPT to put together his case argument for a legal case in New York. This is literally about last month or 6 weeks ago. And I'm not a lawyer, by the way, so forgive me if I describe this in sort of unloyally, clumsy ways. But he asked ChatGPT to write the case for him. He gave all the examples of case law and precedent, and obviously got submitted. And the other side came back and said, "We can't find these in our law." So he went back to ChatGPT and said, "Well, can you give me the references?" And it came up with references, names of judges, dates, and all that. And they sent it back, and they still came back and said, "We can't find it." And it turned out it was complete nonsense. They completely made it up, and he was fined by the judge. And he said, "Well, I didn't realise that's what generative AI did. I just assumed that it was like, you could rely on it." So you are going to have human beings use it. Now, that's not the sort of thing I'm talking about in job centres. I was making a broader point that this is not divinity. It's not omniscient. You need human beings to use these tools to improve their output, to improve what they are doing. But human beings still need to be part of it.
I'm going to do one last round of questions. I'm going to go back. So, lay at the very back and lay in the flowery shirt there. So, from very back, two, and then we'll wrap up.
Thank you. This is Jeannie from Communities at Work. We look forward to welcoming you to our reception next week. Thank you for speaking at that. My question is, will the Labour-led DWP seek partners to help deliver your vision of a broader, smarter and better job service? By way of a small example, I know that you'll know the walking wardrobe service run by Bolson at Home, part of a whole suite of employment services that Housing Association delivers to local people, often economically inactive people at the moment, beyond the purview of JCP. So do you see a way of actually partnering, be that commission or partnership funding, that type of service in the future?
More funds than lady there.
Hello, thank you. Catherine Cook here from Keynote Insights. When you spoke in January really powerfully about your shared commitments with your shadow colleague at health and social care. And it strikes me that you spoke mostly about getting people back to work, but perhaps a little less about in-work progression, although you have mentioned it a couple of times. And I wondered if we could expect future joint commitments from, for example, your shadow colleague at education around careers, advice and skills, or a business around employer rights.
partnerships and in-work progression.
Yeah, so I mean, my colleague Bridget and Phillips in Education, Johnny Reynolds, have been talking about this. Bridget's outlined a plan alongside Keir Starmer last week on our opportunity missions and how we need to give people opportunities to reskill and upskill, absolutely. And there's a particular issue, isn't there? And we've talked about this in the past about the over 50s. I think some over 50s who have perhaps lost their jobs or are looking for new opportunities feel reluctant to take on reskilling training opportunities because they're not convinced that it'll be worth their time. They're going to take some time out, take time out of the labour market to retrain. They need that reassurance that there'll be an opportunity there at the end, that there'll be a job opportunity for them. So we do need to look at the way in which we provide the over 50s with support to reskill and upskill. And that is something we are thinking about. And yes, absolutely on partnership. And I came to the project in Bolton, which is one of these projects which helps people who are who have got some difficulties in their lives, perhaps with an addiction, or perhaps because of they've got themselves into problems with the criminal justice system, and helps people prepare for interviews, gives people a decent suit and a shirt and a tie to go for an interview, etc., etc. Really gives people confidence and their self-belief back to prepare them for the world of work. And it's a really inspirational project. And absolutely, we need more of that partnership working. But here's the thing. Yeah, at the moment, the DWP, in the way in which they contract out employment support, draws a very narrow criteria for who can access it. Basically, people who are on, unemployment-related, the unemployment job-seeking bit of universal credit. And I'm sure it's still the case. It's certainly a statistic that Learning and Work, our friends Learning and Work Institute here, were saying earlier this year, I think it's only 1 in 10 older people or disabled people get any employment support help through the system. That has to change. That has to change. So for Housing Association, which I know you're involved in, with thinks that there are people who can be helped into work and wants to refer them to the employment support, which is either arranged by the job centre or arranged if it's in an area of the country where there's a devolution deal, they should be able to access it. It should not be closed off to people who are only claiming the job-seeking unemployment element of universal credit, because we are missing out on supporting a big group of people who are long-term disabled, or people who are economically inactive. It's a very ugly phrase, but the economically inactive. We need to do more to get support to these people.
Thank you. We've got a couple of minutes over time because there's so much to talk about. You've been very generous with your time and your answers. So I'm going to wrap things up there. All I'm going to do is thank everyone here for coming and ask you to give a hand of thanks to our speakers, Jonathan Ashworth.